Hey Nick, welcome. It's great having you here. What I'm going to do is just jump right into it, and I want to start with something that I hear pretty often, particularly from many in-house marketing teams that struggle to convert research into actionable strategy. So, how can mixed methods, research and clarity in data visualization really empower marketing leaders to drive ROI and then
Mhm.
also help influence leadership decisions?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Janet. Let me answer the question and break it down. The question was, how can organizations use mixed methods research and data visualization to help move numbers like ROI or,
Mhm.
or impact?
Yes.
And that's a kind of a two-sided question. The first is creating feedback loops within the organization to
Mhm.
provide those voices to come out. And that could be something as a voice of the customer program or specific initiatives around market research or product fit. And that gives a testament to the process where, as we are trying to make decisions, we want to make sure that they're evidence backed. It's not just the echo chamber of the boardroom, but it's, again, we're bringing in the customer voice from the outside. I think that's a good first
Mhm.
step. And I see that with a lot of young startups here in the Bay Area, is that there is a link to talk with their CEO one on one because they're really fighting for adoption and they're trying to gain market share. And sometimes these conversations, of which I click on every time, help the CEO understand the intended use and the actual use through screen
Mhm.
shares and explanations of this feature doesn't work here and this is broken. And so rather than trying to always define a roadmap or a future vision, let's try to balance what's working and what's not. So to answer the first part of your question, I think it's really defining that customer feedback loop and that ongoing cycle of a unbiased, evidence-backed decision-making process. And the second is data visualization, is how do we put these at executives' fingertips? What do we do from a presentation as well as a transparency perspective to show the raw data and to visualize here are the things that we're seeing? Because we don't want to have these trapped in some PowerPoint presentations. We
Mhm.
want to have universal access throughout the company to see the metrics and to see the feedback scores and to try to find out why those anomalies exist of something working or not working within our organization.
Mhm.
So it's a democratization of research findings so that when the presentation's done and the researcher says we found this, this, and this, and oh, by the way, we're launching this internally so that product owners and executives and engineers can all see the results of their work.
I notice with Gage, the services you provide vary obviously, and what in terms of necessary for product development. I always specifically talk about persona development because if we don't really nail who it is we're trying to work with, then the messaging and UX, everything just goes sideways.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear your perspective on the importance of getting this part right early on.
Yeah, and I'll give some definition for the listeners at home who may not be as familiar with the
Mhm.
personas. And apologies for the roar in the background. I've started a service design consultancy for San Francisco International Airport, and what you hear right now is the 9:40 flight from San Francisco to Seattle.
Excellent.
So
Great.
the question was around personas. Let's use it in the context of the airport. We have business travels, we have personal travelers, we have travelers with families, we have seniors. We want to try to archetype the different people who come into the airport, international versus domestic, and break down and generalize who these people are and what their needs might be. It's a lot easier to personify things like I need accessibility or I need accommodations with luggage. And through the research, you can start to amalgamate a voice to say that this is again a persona that we can start to find these unique aspects about their experience and about their travel experience and try to prioritize that. Well, we have business travels and they're
Mhm.
accountable for 40% of the revenue of the airport, so let's make sure that we address these things while not taking away any services from the other personas as well. Those personas can get fabricated through informal research process. They can get fabricated through an understanding of data. Like when you book on an Airbnb or an Uber, it asks you, is it business, is it personal? You can understand the balances and how or what percentage of persona that an organization like the airport might deal with. And that's a easy way of talking about how might we, is to put it in the voice of a persona. Because again, it shifts the mindset to become user centric, or human centric rather than requirements and features. You're then trying to solve a workflow or a need. And that's much more motivating than fixing a bug or doing something else.
And when we are talking about design development, you champion a tighter collaboration across disciplines, design, development, strategy. What lessons can many team leaders borrow to break down the silos and drive more of a cross functional alignment?
Yeah, I think the silos are coming down rapidly with the introduction of new tools that anybody can be a designer or a developer with a couple strokes of a keyboard. It could have always been a couple strokes of the keyboard, but now
Mhm,
the prompts in which you write are sort of amplifying whatever it
mhm,
is that you put into it. And so those silos are going to be called into question for the executives out there, either marketing or product, to be
mhm.
able to allocate budget and resources and staffing. And that's all, I think, within the next few months going to be called into question because we're using one another's tools. I could just as easily and have write a PRD when these silos start to break down and a designer with some chops and trying to understand a requirements document can do the initial work of a product manager or vice versa. The UIs are able to be generated just as easily. And
Mhm.
so for the executives and leaders that's having to balance that, I think what is encouraging is a culture of mentorship and transparency and sharing because now we can start to teach each other to be good at these tools and we understand that from a user experience perspective, you're responsible for bringing the human into the loop. You're responsible for the voice of the user and trying to advocate and understand what the research means and how to guide the decision making process for the product.
Just kind of taking off of that a little bit, we have to have AI in as part of this conversation. How do you suggest marketing teams preserve human empathy and insight, especially when many tools are automating segmentation, research, and specifically content creation?
Segmentation, I don't mind. I think that's overdue. A lot of the times, factor analysis has been reserved to some of those more advanced statistical analysis packages like SAS or R,
Mhm.
or going in through the enterprise tier of some of the survey platforms. So to open that up to everybody, and again, for those of you listening at home, segmentation is when you take large scale survey results and you make clusters. This is a start of a persona because these people have these characteristics different from these people with these characteristics. And that's a great entry point into how are we going to define who this cluster is or who this segment is. And so the more access to those kinds of tools and understanding, I think it's coupled with our ability to generate surveys is so much easier than it was, say, 5 years ago, because platforms now do it with a few clicks. And there are marketplaces for participants and respondents. And so that's going to be a great sort of accelerant to, again, statistical analysis or a
Mhm.
quantitative assessment of results. And so I think that that's going to be what is going to be encouraging is that we're going to have to all understand these methods and these
Mhm.
dimensions of analysis. It's going to be it used to be where the design tools were in the hands of the designer and nobody knew how to push those pixels just quite like they did. But now I think again there's going to be a universality of
Mhm.
our different tools and our assessments and it requires again collaboration and transparency and democratization of not only our results and our analysis but also our tools and our methods as well.
Right, which also really requires processes or standardization, a governance framework, something
Hmm.
so that when a new person joins the team, they come in, they should all be in sync. And
Yep.
especially if it's an international company, you've got offshore other teams. So there has to be more of that in sync, sort of systematized approach to it all.
Yeah. And to answer your previous question more directly about AI, and I always like to timestamp how far into any conversation we've gotten before that word comes up. We're now 11 minutes and 2 seconds, barring the edits that will occur. It is a trigger word. There's
Mhm,
so much around that term right now from an ethical perspective, from a climate perspective, from a change and ownership, and even definition. It's such a general term that many people can read it very differently.
mhm,
And there's also this notion of amnesty in the workplace, which I don't think yet exists, where
mhm,
if you or I are using some of these tools to help us do our job better, we're often doing so in secret. And we're not doing so with the sense of sharing our work. I have a couple elementary and high school kids in my household.
mhm.
And one of the things that the teacher tells them is as you're learning arithmetic, show your work. When you're going to try to figure out a math problem, do it in steps and show that along the way. And I think that premise should hold true within our organizations as well, is that to offer amnesty, to say, I don't mind if you use experimental tools and try to get to a better result and a better product, but don't do so with an obfuscation of how you got there because it made your day easier. Instead, do something that shows your work and share it out to everybody else and offer amnesty for this experimentation. I think that the schools don't quite know how to comprehend and
Right.
deal with it. We haven't had an official policy handed down from our two school districts that my kids are in. And so I think they're typically education tends to be a little slower moving than the most industries, but there needs to be a policy and a framework in place so that we can use them to our advantage, that we continue to upskill our employees so that they're as relevant in the workplace as they were 2 or 3 years ago, and that we can improve our bottom line most of all.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's how I see AI in marketing and in product as well as research.
Yeah, there's definitely still we're still in the very early days for sure, and I'm still hearing so many people just with maybe maybe we are early adopters and kind of have been using AI since it sort of started and has gotten smarter, but many people are still just dabbling in it, and
Yeah,
even the professionals are just not sure about how to effectively leverage it as a systems analyst or a business advisor instead of just asking it, just rote kind of questions that you could really get from
yeah.
Google maybe.
Yeah, cocktail
It is
recipes and
interest
travel planning, like, garbage in, garbage out.
exactly. That might actually be valuable, but,
Yeah.
I mean, depending on the day. Can you walk us through an example where research-informed insight directly transformed a marketing or product initiative and
Yeah,
how it translated into measurable outcomes?
yeah, the example that I like to use is a relevant one because it was a video game that is launching in the next couple weeks and months, and so, again, for those of you listening at home, it may not be your cup of tea, but it could be your kids or your grandkids' cup of tea of video games, but there's a skateboarding video game. It was a sequel to a very popular one about 20 years ago when I was playing games, and during COVID, Electronic Arts, which is located right down the road here, wanted to understand the retail habits of the skating subculture, how they like to shop, how they like to buy, what their engagement was with brick and mortar stores as well as online properties. And this was in 7 different countries around the world. And it was interesting because there was such a unique regional perspective to the different brands, especially the American ones versus the local ones. And it was mix of qual and quant, where we went into Brazil, Japan, France, UK, Canada, United States, and found these subcultures, found these skate parks and the retail businesses that catered to them, and started to understand trends and styles and group behavior around how they chose to present themselves. And the method was applied so that we could help Electronic Arts establish the way that people would shop in this video game. One of the things that came out of it, and this was accompanied with a large scale quant survey in 5 different languages to 7,000 respondents. The outcome was around how to position your e commerce platform. What were the attributes of these in game items? For example, in Japan, the sense of individuality wasn't as strong as it was in the United States or Brazil because they wanted to be seen as a clique or a tribe or some sort of
Mhm.
affiliation where they all dressed in the same brand or the same color. Whereas that sense of individuality in Brazil was anti imperialist, where they wanted to make sure that what they represented was their local brand. They even made
Mhm.
skateboards out of wood from the rainforest, not the Canadian maple
Right.
that we find worldwide. And so, as these results were telling these interesting stories, the balance between streetwear and skatewear, the importance of scuffing things,
Mhm.
where it was a testament to your process. Where if you were a skater, you could tell the difference between what type of skater you were by the scuffs on your shoes. On the tip, it was a vert skater. Sorry, on the tip, it was a street skater. And if you had scuffs on the side, you were a vert skater. And so there were these sort of signals that people would be able to communicate with one another, and all this came through ethnographic field research, qualitative interviews, and then large scale quant surveys. And so if you go to your local game store and find Skate 3, you can find the manifestation of all those in a digital avatar world.
Very interesting. Really cool. Well, so my final question, is there one resource that your company has to rely on every day? And it could be a morning smoothie or a workout or a software. but what is that one resource that Gage has to rely on a daily basis?
It's going to be a softball answer, so I apologize ahead of time. But it's the human beings. There's so much noise out there. It's the humans around us, especially those that are qualitative researchers, that are practitioners, that are out there in the field. Those are the ones that are opening our eyes every day to different methods and structures and standards. Because I think that the trap is that with these blinking cursors and these algorithms, that you can find the answers there when you really can't. There won't be a replacement for human conversation. The synthetic users are a half an inch deep. And so I do take pride in a lot of copies and lunch talks, just because I like keeping that voice of confidence and clarity.
Yeah, like the answer, it's excellent. And lastly, what final message would you like to leave with anything maybe we didn't discuss or that you'd like to share as your final message?
Yeah, I would go back to the first answer to the first question, is that establish that you're the human in the loop, that you have the curiosity about the end user, and that there's a voice of the customer program, whether it be through an outside agency like me or if it's an internal extension of the sales support department, is that there's some sense of wanting to balance priorities with human concerns, because it's so easy to get entranced in the numbers and the sexiness of what's next, without grounding yourself in what experience is currently underway.
Yes, and this is human over AI. I
Mm.
completely agree. We gotta get back to the human. Well, thank you so much, Nick. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way that they can get in touch with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. The last name is Cawthon, Nick Cawthon, and then my agency is called Gauge, GAUGE.io, and we're located in the San Francisco Bay Area, but we've done work all over the world. So we look forward to hearing from you and helping you uncover unanswered questions.
Thanks so much, Nick. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Janet.